Welcome back to the most intriguing military battles. This is the second part of the Battle of Culloden, and here we are again, in the hills of beautiful Scotland, where at the end of our previous episode, we left the rebel army under the command of Prince Charles, attempting to outflank the mildly intoxicated British soldiers, who were peacefully sleeping at their camp at Balblair, not knowing how close they were to total defeat as the Scots were getting ready for their surprise attack. Now, it was getting dark, and there was no clear roadmap to get to the British camp, since their GPS didn't work so well so far from civilization.
If it's no Scottish, it's crap!
Prince Charles's army had to rely on intuition. That got them in trouble, as parts of the army made it within earshot of the enemy camp, while others were far behind. In the end, morning came much sooner than anticipated, and having lost the element of surprise, the rebel army had only one sensible thing left to do: to go back from where they came from. Now, they were even more exhausted, hungrier, and colder than they were before. While Prince Charles and Lord Murray dragged their army through the cold and rainy night, Cumberland soldiers were full and content, happily sleeping like little British babies. Having awoken refreshed and rejuvenated, they thought to themselves, what a good day for a deadly battle. At around 7 a.m., the Redcoat army was on the move, in evenly spaced columns, led by the Campbells of Mamor's Argyll militia, once again demonstrating the fact that this wasn't exclusively a Scottish versus British army engagement, since Scots fought on both sides. The Jacobite army took the same positions as they did the day before, enjoying the rain, sleet, and wind, making the use of muskets that much harder. By 11 a.m., the armies were in front of each other. The British army marched in 3 columns, each consisting of 5 battalions in perfect order. On the left, there was a 4th column, made up of 3 regiments of horse guards, while on the right came the artillery train, under the command of William Bedford. Few on either side of the conflict knew that he would be the decisive force to bring victory to Cumberland's army. They moved into standard battlefield formation, 3 ranks deep, with infantrymen well drilled and equipped. Right after 12 o'clock, the artillery battle kicked off the action, showing immediately the unquestionable superiority of British gunners. For almost an hour, British cannons wreaked havoc in the Scottish ranks, with not much retaliation from the opposing army. Most Jacobite commanders were begging to be allowed to attack, but the order never came. Between the very disadvantageous, mucky, and uneven flat ground and the lack of coordination, you can see how the Jacobites' historically successful tactic of the Highland charge was thwarted from the start. At last, Prince Charles, who, strangely, set up his command center on a low point without a clear line of sight to the battlefield, gave the order. He failed, however, to follow up that it was indeed delivered, as he was preoccupied by the pacification of the deeply offended leaders of Clan Donald, who were not given their traditional spot on the right side of the battle line.
We are all MacDonalds, and as such, we are entitled to stand on the right in the line of battle.
The courier of the order to advance was killed, and then the order had to be repeated, while valuable time was lost. Finally, the Scottish line advanced, led by Clan Chatham at the center, Clan Atholl and Camerons on the right. The regiments on the left, mostly Clan Reynolds and Glengarry, had a longer run-in, and as a result, the front was not unified as the army advanced. most Highlanders discarded their muskets and rushed fearlessly with their broadswords. And that's where Bedford's artillerymen introduced Scotsmen to the grape shot, which was a tin can, packed with round balls and nails that spread out in many directions upon exiting the cannon, turning it into a giant shotgun. The impact was horrific, with several hundred Scotsmen mowed down in less than 10 minutes. This put a stop to the terrifying momentum of the famous Highlander charge. Once the two armies got close, British soldiers unleashed a well-organized musket volley, as British Brown Bessies worked their magic, despite the ugly weather. Those Highlanders who made it to the British front lines had another surprise waiting for them. After all that they had been through already, the Highlanders that finally got face to face with the British soldiers weren't able to capitalize on their superior skills in hand-to-hand combat. The counter-tactic that the British came up with was to train their soldiers to stab the Scotsmen to their right, rather than the one immediately in front of them. The Scots attacked forward while the Brits stabbed the Highlander facing their comrade on their right under his right arm. Since the Scots were preoccupied by holding their broadswords, they were caught by surprise. This was the tipping point, and despite their bravery, Scottish forces were effectively surrounded, with the Kingston Horse Regiment sweeping from the right flank to chase out and cut down the disoriented Highlanders. And that is where Cumberland is said to have uttered his famous phrase, "The problem with Scotland
Is that it's full of Scots."
Or maybe he didn't. One thing is for sure. The Scottish army fought with extreme bravery despite all odds, but it was doomed from the very start. The victory was as complete as it could be, and within an hour, the affair was over. Prince Charles barely escaped with his life, eventually making his way to France, while Cumberland unleashed a campaign of pure and unnecessary terror among the civilian population of Scotland. This iron fist policy complicated relations between Britain and Scotland for decades. Soon after, Cumberland returned to the continent, where he fought the French with intermittent success, eventually returning home. The consequences of this final defeat of the Scottish army ended centuries of traditions, at least from a legal aspect. The Act of Prescription was a series of efforts intended to assimilate the Highland Scots and put an end to the clan system. It was followed by the Heritable Jurisdictions Act of 1746, which removed the feudal authorities the clan chieftains had enjoyed. Scottish heritable sheriffdoms reverted back to the crown, and other heritable jurisdictions, including regalities, came under the power of the courts. The Dress Act specifically targeted Highland clothes. Tartan cloth wasn't really the focus, but most interpreted it that way. Who doesn't love a man in a kilt? But as future British monarchs proved, starting in the 19th century during Queen Victoria's reign, kilts made a fashion comeback. As a military victory, Culloden remained Cumberland's crown jewel for the rest of his career. He did, however, leave a supremely important legacy with respect to complete reorganization of the British Army. Allow me to elaborate. See, for most of English history, until 1660 to be exact, the country didn't have a standing army, relying exclusively on militia, which was raised as it was needed, to defend the realm. Thus, the idea of a standing army was only 80 or so years old when Cumberland picked up the cause. While the idea wasn't new, and Britain already had professional soldiers, it was a standing army in name only, since 80 to 90% of it was demobilized after the hour of need had passed. England simply could not wean itself off of the monetary benefits of having a militia, since it didn't cost anything when there was no military action. The only problem was that the militia could not be deployed outside of the island, thus leaving those responsibilities to the standing army. During the Battle of Culloden, the superiority of professional soldiery became clear to anyone willing to look, offering Cumberland a massive boost in support of the idea. Given the ongoing increase in complexity of military hardware, artillery, and tactics, the need for highly trained soldiers was becoming obvious. Additionally, the benefits of coordination between various branches of military were made very clear during the Culloden campaign, with the Royal Navy providing unwavering support to Cumberland. Many historians ask, or at least they should be asking, a simple question. What do Sheldon Cooper and Cumberland have in common? The answer is simple and obvious. They both have fun with flags.
Welcome to Sheldon Cooper Presents Fun with Flags.
The flags of the British Army regiments had the name and insignias of its commander, who had to purchase his commission, basically buying the right to command a given army unit. Thus, it was money, and not the ability of commanders, that served as a decisive factor in the selection of senior leadership. Captain General Cumberland was determined to reorganize and enlarge the existing armed forces, and to make sure that the army was loyal to the king, and not to their respective regimental commanders. His top-to-bottom army reforms proved to be inclusive and radical, increasing the reliance on meritocratic principles. The pinnacle of this program was the regimental reform, which essentially destroyed, though not completely, the deeply inefficient proprietary system of ownership by colonels, which had proven to be massively detrimental to good order and uniformity, since each unit behaved like an independent army in its own right. The goal of his reform was to switch the allegiance of the army towards royal authority, standardize the structure of the army, while increasing the level of its competency. Cumberland succeeded, to varying degrees, in all of these objectives. The fact that his father, King George II, was on his side clearly did not hurt Cumberland's crusade, as no one would ever have to ask him,
Who is your daddy and what does he do?
One of the most intriguing consequences that I came across relates to the United States. It's postulated by some that a Stuart monarchy might have had a very different view of British colonies, which could have meant that there would not have been an American Revolution. In addition, the Highland Scots, who populated the Appalachian Mountains of the United States and parts of Canada, might not have made this trip. Many were forced to migrate, either in an attempt to escape the clearances or as indentured servants. So, fellow fans of history and possibly historical fiction, I hope that I've told a good tale of the legendary Scots, separating fact from fiction, but not completely dispelling any myth of the fierce Highlanders and their fight for freedom. Please do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next episode.